Everything around us is energy. We will be looking at the tormented but vital rapport between the forces of energy and the needs of mankind, and the delicate relationship between that rapport and the environment in the journey around the world described in these films. The sun, that all-powerful cosmic source of primary energy, is the generating force behind all the world's natural rhythms. Like the changing seasons, the sun's heat provokes the differences in the density of the air that give birth to the winds, breezes, gales, hurricanes, negative, destructive energy. And yet, when expressed as a totally aggressive force, energy never destroys. It does not eradicate, and the death it brings is never conclusive. Only a phenomenon that transforms. Yes, energy transforms matter and knows how to transform itself, how to change things on an infinitely small scale and on a gigantic scale. Eruptions of titanic geological forces have changed the face of the world and molded it. Energy from the molten heart of our planet, from the sea floor, has thrust up mountains. The Dolomites were once coral reefs, atolls in a tropical sea. Today's snow-covered peaks used to be a sun-bathed archipelago in the Sea of Tethys, which disappeared forever 58 million years ago. Immense cataclysms. Inexorable expressions of geological energy that were not only capable of creating, but also of plunging entire chains of mountains into the ocean depths. From oceans to seas to lakes and lagoons, the sun's heat energy turns water into vapor. And when it causes evaporation on an uninterrupted scale, the vapor falls back to Earth in the form of thick fog or mist. Or swells into cloud formations. Concentrations of vapor energy that, by releasing rain and snow, feed the world's rivers. Creating waterfalls and cataracts. A wide variety of spectacular natural sights that never ceases to amaze. Energy means constant metamorphosis. In the form of sunlight, it stimulates the process of photosynthesis, from which all growth originates, giving rise to the verdant propagation of the plant world. A wealth of nourishing varieties that feeds all living creatures, from insects to more highly evolved species, thus making possible the reproduction of every form of life. Within the great symphonic expression of the forces of nature, energy is present in life itself, symbolized by every living form. The more a species evolves, the more it develops, the more efficient it becomes, the greater its need for energy. Energy for attacking, for defending itself, for surviving, for reproducing, and for feeding itself. The miracle of existence has always been and will always be a spurt of energy. Life-sustaining energy that represents so much more. In fact, energy is not only the essence of life, but the very basis of the evolutionary process. Man became man by separating himself from the animal kingdom, when, for the first time, he used his energy to achieve an extraordinary step forward. The ability to stand erect, to walk, to run, and to hunt on two legs. Being able to nourish himself more efficiently meant having access to increased reserves of greater energy. Yes, for mankind, energy and evolution have always been inseparable. One conditions the other. Energy and evolution have progressed together for thousands and thousands of years. The millennia that separate us from that moment in time when a quaint, weak creature lifted himself up and began hesitantly to walk erect. An achievement that belongs to no other creature in the animal kingdom. Evidence of this historic moment has been passed on to us from the hominoid age. The hominoids were the first human-like creatures. They lived some 3.5 million years ago in Africa, in an area now known as Rift Valley. It is here in Rift Valley that in the last 2 or 3 decades, the world's most important paleontological discoveries have been made. One of these finds concerns the hominoids. 2 of them left their mark right here in this part of Africa at a time when it was still geologically active. The find was made on the slopes of a great volcano that is now extinct. Petrified footprints. Evidence of man's first use of his own physical energy to stand erect. Finds made by anthropologist L.S.B. Leakey on the site of the extinct volcano at Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, confirm not only the existence of a hominoid and his female companion, but also that they walked confidently on 2 feet. This sign of their presence was caught for posterity in the ash spewed out from the nearby crater. Ash that in the course of time solidified into rock and passed on to us after 3 million years, footprints that seem like they might have been made yesterday. Among the giant steps in the history of our evolution are those changes achieved more through the use of the intellect than through sheer physical strength. Further investigation of Rift Valley in Africa reveals a simple plaque placed in memory of the finding of the remains of the Australopithecus, an early descendant of Adam and Eve who lived here 1,800,000 years ago. Using stones and rocks, he and his kind were pioneers in the controlled use of energy. Spurred on by the need to improve their hunting methods and diet, these first men produced an object to meet this challenge. The use of hewn stone or flints, the first tools, dates back over 2 million years. By definition, a tool is anything that increases man's physical strength and consequently his energy. The story of human evolution is marked by the production of an ever-increasing number of tools, ever stronger and more diversified. Objects designed by man to equip himself with characteristics that nature neglected to provide. Longer arms, beak, claws. Attributes that multiplied his strength 100-fold. In other words, the tools he produced made a weak, defenseless creature into a giant who would eventually dominate the earth and even explore outer space. Wonder tools produced by an intelligence with an ever-increasing need to wield more energy. As time went by, man found ingenious ways to perfect the tools, weapons, and instruments that served to improve his efficiency. A scene that belongs to the past, indicating how tools multiplied the individual's strength, contrasts sharply with today's complex mechanical equipment. Yes, gradually the use of simple tools led to the construction of gigantic machines. Like this one, used in the North African desert to lower into place sections of a gas pipeline. The so-called Transmed that carries energy from the Sahara to Italy's Po Valley, more than 2,500 kilometers away. A lifeline of mankind's material progress that began to move forward more quickly when man rejected a diet of berries, roots, and fruit and became a hunter, inventing weapons that became more and more sophisticated. Like this Australian Aborigine Woomerang, a device that multiplies the energy of the arm by extending its range of action when thrown. Hunting improved primitive man's diet, which in turn increased the speed of our evolution. Australian Aborigine rock paintings express the creativity of all mankind at another landmark moment in the story of human development. The application of mental powers progressed at the same rate as man's exploitation of raw materials and the growth of his expertise in the field of energy. The domestication of fire modified man's rapport with the environment. Man harnessed one of the basic forms of energy when he achieved total control of the use of fire. The result was another giant step forward that brought with it the ability to work metals. The mastery of fire was followed by ever more rapid material, cultural, and economic development. Constant growth that required more and more readily available energy. From fire to wind and water. Then steam, coal, oil, natural gas, uranium. Tomorrow, harnessing the inexhaustible solar battery may provide unlimited clean energy. But by turning to the sun for energy, we are only following in the footsteps of early man. In fact, even though at the present time we are only beginning to exploit the sun's potential and expect that it may provide the answer to our future energy needs, we know that the sun's power is equally inscribed in our past. With every step we take on our journey around the world, the sun makes its presence felt. It is the absolute sovereign of vast tracts of desert like the Sahara. A boundless wasteland today which only 8,000 years ago was carpeted with vegetation and pastureland. Evidence of this ancient world, a veritable paradise before the African sun turned the ground to sand, can be found in thousands and thousands of rock paintings, in deep caves, and on rock faces smoothed by the wind. A silent but extraordinarily vivid description of what life was like for the people of the Sahara during its green period. In those days, the people were hunters and stock herders. There was no lack of water and pasture land for the livestock, and prey abounded for the hunters. Thousands of years later, in areas now being explored for energy reserves, remains are being found from the days when this desert was covered with green pastures and full of game. These arrowheads belong to Neolithic hunters. They were found on a site where today other hunters, equally adept and tenacious, are seeking another kind of prey: energy. The oil and the natural gas that lie in the bowels of the earth beneath the Sahara. On exploration and drilling sites, this, for instance, is the ROM-1 well, drilled by an Italian-Algerian team in the heart of the Saharan erg. It is not unusual to find remains that date back to the days when this great desert was fertile land that abounded in game. Those vast expanses of fertile land have long since disappeared, burned dry by a hostile sun. Even so, man has returned here to seek with stubborn determination the wealth that lies under the sand. After the fields, pasture lands, forests, and rivers disappeared forever, this area was given the name Sahara, which means nothing. A nothing with one exception. On the eastern border of this vast area, 5 million square kilometers of aridity, lies the green, irrigated strip of land that protected and fed the people who sought its refuge. The area owes its fertility to a river, the Nile. Here, descendants of the herdsmen and hunters of Neolithic times, together with other races that moved in from the east and south, became farmers. The great river encouraged the development of their settlements and helped them progress to such a degree that they created a civilization that had a profound influence on the history of mankind. Sailing the Nile today, it is not difficult to imagine what life was like in ancient times. Remains of the past are everywhere and are not restricted to archaeological interest. Many are not even from the age of the pharaohs. Some date back to earlier times when other civilizations flourished in the Nile Valley. This magical atmosphere is permeated with the sensation that time has stood still for thousands of years. Along the river, there are still working examples of ingenious devices designed to alleviate the burden of everyday life. Primitive but functional links in the rapport between man and energy. Yes, astonishing though it may seem, devices powered by the two natural energy sources harnessed in primordial times by the peoples of the Nile, water and wind, are still in use today. As our journey continues, we'll be seeing in the next part of the series how from this utilization of the forces of nature, water and wind, stemmed man's seeking after an ever more developed production of energy, and thus led to ever more evolved expressions of civilization.